cool. The night stretched thin like old glass, and the streets whispered of rain, as the driver's wife stood beneath the flickering lamp that had watched her grow older with every passing cab that was not his. She had once waited for him with fire in her chest, but now only the dull ache of memory filled her. She could still see his hands gripping the steering wheel, the same hands that had touched her cheek before leaving for the night shift, saying he would be back by dawn, and he always was, until he wasn't. The city swallowed him one rain-soaked morning, leaving behind a jacket that still smelled of tobacco and a promise that never reached home. And so she waited, through winters that bit her skin and SARS that melted her resolve. She waited as if her breath could call him back from wherever he had gone. But one night the light shifted, and a shape stepped out of the fog. Not her husband, but a stranger, with eyes too kind for the hour. He said he had known the driver, said they had shared stories over roadside coffee, and that her husband had spoken of her like a song that made silence jealous. She asked if he had seen him, if he knew where he was, and the man only bowed his head and said, "Some roads don't end where they should," and that the driver had told him to find her, to tell her that every road he took led back to her, even when it didn't. The driver's wife felt the world tilt and steady again. She saw in this man's tired face the reflection of all her waiting. She asked if he would stay a while, because the rain was coming, and it was cruel to let a traveler face it alone. He nodded, and for the first time in years, she did not stand under that lamp alone. And though the night was still long, she felt it breathe differently, as if her waiting had finally been seen by someone who understood that love sometimes does not return, but it can still arrive. He sat beside her on the cracked stone steps where moss grew like old secrets, and she spoke of the driver as though he were still turning corners somewhere, still chasing the next fare, still promising that one day he would drive far enough to see the edge of the world. She told the man that she used to listen for the sound of his engine, that low hum that told her he was almost home, and that sometimes she still heard it in the wind when the city fell quiet. The man listened, his eyes heavy with stories he would never tell, and she saw in him the same kind of loneliness that had built a home inside her chest. The rain came soft and slow, turning the air silver, and the man shrugged off his coat to place it around her shoulders. She wanted to refuse, but she could not remember the last time someone had cared enough to offer warmth. She asked him what brought him here truly, and after a silence that stretched like dusk, he said he had driven once too, that he had carried people who spoke to the night like it could answer them, that he had learned something from her husband. Something about love that waits even when it breaks you. She felt something shift inside her, like the creak of a door long locked. She told him she had waited, because leaving felt like betrayal, because the lamp was their meeting place, and she feared that if she walked away, he would come back to find nothing left of her. And the man said, perhaps he already had, perhaps the waiting itself was what brought him back, in ways she could not see. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw that his eyes were not just kind, but familiar, in a way that trembled through her bones. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small token, a faded photo torn at the edge. It was her husband, smiling in the driver's seat with the city behind him. And written on the back were the words, "For her when the road ends." She touched the photo as though it could still be warm, and the tears that came did not feel like grief. They felt like release. She thanked the man, though she did not know what she was thanking him for, and he said the driver had saved his life once, that he owed him this, that he had come to keep his promise. When the rain stopped, the sky turned pale with the first light, and the man stood to leave. She asked where he would go, and he said, "Anywhere the road forgives." Her heart ached to let him go, yet she understood that waiting must end somewhere. As he walked away, she lifted her eyes to the empty street and whispered goodbye, not to the man, not to the night, but to the years that had kept her bound. And when the morning came, the lamp went out for the first time in forever, and she finally turned toward home. Lee, all